please.
Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Jim Lentz. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Toyota Motor Sales, U.S.A. In my testimony, I will address Toyota's recent recalls and the decisive actions that we're taking to restore trust in the tens of millions of Americans who purchase and drive our vehicles. For 2 generations, we've provided Americans with cars and trucks that are safe and reliable. And we fully intend to produce even safer and higher quality vehicles into the future, even as we pave the way for the next generation of electric vehicles and hybrids that our society needs. In recent months, we've not lived up to our high standards our customers and the public have come to expect from Toyota. Put simply, it's taken us too long to come to grips with a rare but serious set of safety issues, despite all of our good faith efforts. The problem has also been compounded by our poor communications within our company and with regulators and consumers. While all auto companies have recalls and all major auto companies have experienced complaints about intended acceleration, Toyota's recalls have caused concern among our customers. I would like to assure the committee and the American people that nothing is more important to Toyota than the safety and the reliability of the vehicles that our customers drive. We're committed to not only fixing the vehicles on the road and ensuring that they're safe, but making all of our new vehicles better, even more reliable through strict quality controls, enhanced communication, and redoubling our focus on putting the customer first. Our 1,500 dealers are making tremendous efforts to complete our recalls as quickly and as conveniently as possible for our customers. Some dealers are staying open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're repairing vehicles at the rate of about 50,000 a day. Thus far, we've repaired nearly 800,000 vehicles. We've rigorously tested our solutions, and we're confident that these repairs to Toyota vehicles will make them among the safest on the road today. Our engineers have identified 2 specific mechanical causes of unintended acceleration covered by recalls. We currently address these through our open recalls. One involves floor mats that, when loose or improperly fitted, can entrap the accelerator pedal. The other concerns accelerator pedals that can, over time, grow sticky with wear and humidity. The solutions that we've developed are both effective and durable. We are confident that no problems exist in our electronic throttle systems in our vehicles. We've designed our electronic throttle system with multiple fail-safe mechanisms to shut off or reduce engine power in the event of a system failure. We've done extensive testing on this system, and we've never found a malfunction that's caused unintended acceleration. Additionally, in December, we asked Exponent, a world-class engineering and scientific consulting firm, to conduct a comprehensive independent analysis of our electronic throttle system with an unlimited budget. Their interim report confirms that it works as it's designed. Toyota will make the results of this comprehensive evaluation available to the public and to Congress as soon as it's completed. So why did it take so long to get this to this point? With respect to pedal entrapment, Toyota conducted investigations of consumer complaints which focused too narrowly on technical issues without taking full account on the way consumers used our vehicles. In the case of sticking accelerator pedals, we failed to promptly analyze and respond to information emerging from Europe and in the United States. We acknowledge these mistakes. We apologize for them, and we've learned from them. We now understand that we must think differently when investigating complaints and communicate faster, better, and more effectively with our customers and with our regulators. Our recent voluntary recalls of certain 2010 Prius and Lexus hybrids and certain 2010 Tacoma trucks illustrate this approach. We're also going further. Our President Akio Toyoda has announced a top-to-bottom review of our operations that he will personally lead with the support of a new Chief Quality Officer from North America and our other principal regions. We will ask independent outside experts to evaluate the findings to make sure that we meet or exceed industry standards. We're expanding our network of technical offices in the U.S. so we can gather information faster and respond more aggressively to incident reports. And we will install advanced brake override systems in all of our new models, making us one of the first full-line manufacturers to offer this customer confidence feature as standard equipment. Additionally, we're announcing that we will install this system on an expanded range of vehicles, including Tacoma, Venza, and Sequoia models that are capable of accepting this new software. We had previously announced this system would be installed in Camry, Avalon, Lexus ES, and IS models. These actions underscore that Toyota is going above and beyond what's necessary in terms of vehicle modifications and repairs to ensure that our customers can be completely confident in the safety and reliability of their cars and trucks. Chairman Waxman, Subcommittee Chairman Supak, and ranking members, as well as members of the committee. These are only some of the steps that we're taking to earn back the confidence of Congress and the American people. Our 200,000 team members, dealership employees, and suppliers in the U.S. are the backbone of that effort. And I'm confident that we will succeed in restoring customer trust in our quality, safety, and reliability of our vehicles. Thank you very much. I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Chairman Waxman for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, thank you for your testimony, your cooperation with this committee's investigation. These past few months have not been a happy time for your company or for your customers. People have been very anxious about what appears to be a rare situation, but it is a very scary and possibly fatal situation if a car has a sudden acceleration and the car seems to be out of control. For the future, you're suggesting that you're going to put in a system where the brake will override the gas pedal?
Yes, 2011 model year vehicles. So with the exception of maybe one vehicle, by the end of this calendar year, most of the vehicles that come into the U.S. will have as standard equipment the brake override system.
That will be helpful. But let me ask you about the cars that are already on the road. People have these vehicles. You're not planning to do any retrofit of the brake over the gas pedal in those cars, are you?
There are 7 of those vehicles that are currently on the road that we are retrofitting.
There are 7?
Seven models. Camry, Avalon.
You're going to retrofit all the vehicles then?
Those that are technically possible, we are retrofitting.
Okay.
It
Excuse me
varies
1 minute,
by model
Chairman.
year.
Is your microphone still working, Mr. Lentz? Is the light on?
The green light's on.
Okay. Just try it a little closer if you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, how many vehicles will then be on the road with the possible problem if the problem is due to something other than the mats or the sticky pedal?
I don't know the exact number of vehicles on the road that will have the BOSS system. It is the majority, but I can't tell you Exactly what that percentage is, I don't know.
Majority of the vehicles on the road that are already on the road will be retrofitted.
Yes, vehicles on the road will be retrofitted.
Okay. Now, I mentioned in my opening statement, and it's been well publicized, that I've been critical of your assurances to the American people, and I think we have a film we could show you, but well, let's see if we can get that in.
How confident are you that this is it, that you have found the problem behind unintended acceleration in Toyota?
Yeah, we're very confident. Between the first recall that we've had on the entrapment of the pedal and now this on the overall pedal, I think we have it.
I have to be honest with you, most people are listening to this and there's going to be an air of skepticism. You came to us in October and said, we believe that unintended acceleration is caused by floor mats entrapping the pedal. Then you came back in December and you said, you know what, there may be some sticking accelerator pedals. We're going to be recalling these vehicles. And then finally, last week or within the last 2 weeks, you said we're going to stop production and we're going to look for a physical fix. There is an air of questioning whether or not you really have your ducks in a row here in terms of unintended acceleration.
Yeah, we are very confident that the fix in place is going to stop what's going on.
We're having some trouble with our sound system. Do you stand by that statement? Are you still confident that the two recalls that you put into place will solve the problem?
Let me make sure that it's very clear on my statement.
Okay.
Unintended acceleration, as I view it and define it, is any time that a driver removes their input from the accelerator and the vehicle continues at some speed. And there are many different causes for that. There are mechanical causes, whether it's a software issue in a transmission, whether it could be an idle up from an air conditioner, whether it could be a faulty cruise control, whether it could be a pedal, in this case an entrapped pedal.
Well, what concerns me, Mr. Lentz, is that there seems to be a difference between your statement that was given on television and the statements that other Toyota officials have given to our committee staff. Even your own counsel in a letter to us said that the sticky pedals become lodged in a partially depressed position, which typically does not translate into a sudden high-speed acceleration event. Also, it appears that you're trying to give assurances to people, convince them that both of Toyota's recent recalls will address the problem, but our committee's investigation calls into accuracy your statement because 70% of the complaints of sudden unintended acceleration that come into Toyota's customer call line were from vehicles, drivers whose vehicles were not included in either of these recalls. How do you respond to that?
Well, if I could, the week that I was, the week, it seemed like a week, the day that I was in New York doing interviews, there were a number of television interviews. There was also an audio conference call with about 150 journalists. And if I could read to you just a response that I made to a question.
It's different than the one on television?
Yes.
And is it more consistent with what we're being told privately by your counsel and by your own
I don't know exactly
people?
what that is, but can I just...
let me ask you the question just directly.
Please.
Do you believe that the recall on the carpet changes and the recall on the sticky pedal will solve the problem of sudden unintended acceleration?
Not totally.
Okay, what do you need to do?
We need to continue to be vigilant and continue to investigate all of the complaints that we get from consumers that we have done a relatively poor job of doing in the past.
And why haven't you looked at the possibility of the electronics and the computer system being a possible fault, as we heard from the first witnesses on
We have looked
witnesses in our first panel?
We have looked into the electronics. And based on the testing that we've done in Japan and now Exponent, that you saw the initial response from their testing, we continue to test the ETCS in Japan as well as now what Exponent is doing, and we have not found a malfunction. It doesn't mean that we stop.
But Exponent's evaluation has been very, very criticized as not very well done, not scientifically. The sample was too small. an unreliable report. Do you have something more from Japan that you haven't given us?
I am relying on the information that I have received from Japan, that they are confident that testing has been done in Japan, and they are confident that there are not issues with the ECU.
Well, Mr. Lentz, my time is up. Let me just tell you, I'm not confident that you're looking for something that you don't think exists, because if you're not looking for it, you won't find it. And we had these two witnesses earlier who spent 3 hours and came up with the possibility that this sudden acceleration could take place because of the electronics and the computer system. That report that you gave to our committee from Exponent does not justify ruling that possibility out.
It's not intended to do that. That's just the beginning of their investigation. They have many, many more steps to complete, and we will provide you with that final when they get it done. That's just the beginning.
That report is the beginning, but that beginning only started this month.
It started in
February of 2010. You're only starting to look at it, and you had an analysis done that was quite inadequate. We need to be sure that you're doing a full and adequate analysis of something you've denied, but which other witnesses have shown us is very possible as an explanation for the sudden acceleration. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I know other members will want to pursue this with Mr. Lentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Burgess for questions.
Well, Mr. Lentz, just to continue on that same line that Chairman was just following, yes, you have a responsibility to do these things, but there is also a federal agency who's responsible for traffic safety that has an oversight role here. What have they told you about their independent testing of your electronic throttle control systems?
I don't know specifically of the results of the tests, other than there have been many, many cases in the past that have been opened, investigations that have been closed, and they have not found anything. I can't tell you specifically what their testing paradigm was.
Well, and of course, we've had so much data in front of us today. Right. There's one graph here that shows the complaints of unintended, uncommanded acceleration. It really started in 2002, which my understanding is that's the year that the electronic throttle control actually came into being on your cars. Is that correct?
I believe 2001 might have been the first year on LS, but it's very close.
Now you heard Mr. Gilbert testify here, and actually was a response to Mr. Boyer's question, that he cut no wires when he did his simulation. Have your guys been able to reproduce his results without cutting wires?
Exponent, in their initial study, I was up at Exponent a few weeks ago, and they showed how they tested a vehicle for a vehicle short and other situations that involve the electronics from the pedal to the throttle ECM.
Were they able to reproduce what Mr. Gilbert showed?
No, in every case, they went into an error code. We received Mr. Gilbert's information very, very late.
Yeah, let me ask you this: Are you going to hire him now? It took him 3 hours to find the problem. If he's correct, we have to make that leap of faith.
But quite frankly, we encourage people to try to find this. It's not in our interest, if a problem exists, to not find it and not figure it out. So if it exists, we encourage the Mr. Gilberts of the world to look at it. It just seems a little too good to be true that somebody could figure this out in 3.5 hours when an industry has been looking for this for 10 years.
Now, it may not be fair to ask you to testify to this, but you heard Mr. Gilbert's testimony. Do you or someone in your organization think it is possible that what he's described would be responsible for what happened? And if it did, would you expect to see some physical evidence, chafing of wires, crossing of wires, or something that actually brought two circuits into contact with the correct amount of resistance and then putting the 5 volts on top of it to create the uncommanded acceleration? Is there anyone in your organization who's able to talk to us about that?
Vince is here. He's one of our attorneys, and he has been working with Exponent. And at some point, we'd love to get Exponent and Mr. Gilbert maybe together. But if you would like, Vince can give you a very quick explanation of what they found. I'm not an engineer,
right.
So I'd probably mess this up.
Since we're taking testimony under oath, I don't know what's permissible here.
Yeah,
Let me just ask you a question on the fix, because I know your dealers in my area, Toyota of Louisville, has been, I mean, they've been Johnny on the spot with this. They've been getting people in, takes them 20 minutes to fix it. But if they're fixing the wrong problem, and they really need to be developing whatever you just called the advanced override for the brake system, then you wonder if we're going to have to call people in yet for another fix to the problem. Now, what actually fixes the accelerator pedal? What have you developed that will fix that problem on the recall?
There are two different issues. In the case of a sticky accelerator pedal, they're actually putting in a precision cut steel plate.
We call that a shim, right?
Oh, yes.
How many different sizes of precision cut plates are you producing?
I believe it's either 7 or 9.
7 or 9?
Yes. Yes.
And presumably this material that's hygroscopic and absorbing water and becoming incompatible with proper function, presumably that's a precision manufactured component, is it not?
I would assume so. I don't know anything about the manufacturing.
The fact that you have to have 7 or 9 different size shims?
Well, I think it has to do with the amount of wear that's actually on that shim. So when the technician takes the pedal off, they actually measure how large the gap is, and that determines the size of the shim that they put in, the steel plate.
But it does strain credulity that you would have to a precision designed grommet or the shim that we're talking about. It just doesn't seem reasonable that there would have to be so many different sizes in order to fix the problem if the problem was the pedal absorbing atmospheric moisture.
The size difference is in very small millimeters. I mean, to the naked eye, you can tell the difference between the biggest and the smallest. But as you go down the road, they're very, very close in total size. But what it really does is it ensures that excess friction won't build up in the pedal. And what's happened in the past is with wear, it gets shiny. And once humidity is added to that, it actually builds up too much friction. And that's when the pedal starts to bind or possibly stick.
Now, this fix on this recall, I mean, the National Highway Traffic Safety Agency Administration, they've signed off on this and feel that this fixes the problem? Have they looked at it themselves?
They don't sign off. We show them our solution, and they don't disagree. So we are confident it's the right fix.
What about the fix of putting the advanced brake override system in?
Advanced brake overrides in production vehicles has already started on vehicles like ES and Camry.
But for those of us who have older model Toyotas that wanted to have that degree of safety built in for our families, how do we go about getting that done?
It's a reflash on those 7 vehicles, and it varies by vehicle, by model year.
A reflash, you mean to reset the computer?
It's a reflash of the computer to be able to add that.
And technically, how difficult is that to do?
It takes anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes.
And how much does it cost?
We're providing that.
It just seems reasonable that that's something that really should happen in addition to all these other things, just to be on the safe side.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's for added consumer confidence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burgess. Well, on this rebooting of this computer there, why only some of the vehicles are going to be rebooted, not the other ones?
It depends on the feasibility of the unit. Some of the computers have different types of chips in them.
Okay.
Some are not rewritable, basically. They're hard-coded.
So can't you fix those, rewrite it, the program, so all your vehicles are covered? I mean, what do you say to these owners who are not going to have this safety feature added to it? They're just going to continue to drive down the road and hope they don't have a sudden unintended acceleration?
Well, again, the incident or the possibility of that happening is very, very slim. But understanding if it happens to you, it's a very, very important incident.
Sure. Very, very slim. Let's take a look at that from slim, and let's go to shim. Because you talked a lot about the shim there with Mr. Burgess. But the documents that we asked for, and I put this in our letter on February 22nd, on second page, I was going to ask you this question. We wrote to you on February 2nd to request any analysis that Toyota that shows sticky pedals can cause sudden unintended acceleration. You didn't produce any analysis. In fact, your counsel actually said, quote, typically a sticky pedal does not translate into a sudden high-speed acceleration event. So this shim isn't going to solve the sudden unintended acceleration.
It will prevent unintended acceleration. High speed, most likely not, because in the few incidents where we had a pedal stick, it's a very low throttle opening.
Well, as Chairman Waxman pointed out, of the complaints you have in your own database, approximately 70% of the sudden unintended acceleration events in your own database involves vehicles that are not subject to the floor mat or the sticky pedal recall. So 70% of the problem isn't being addressed by the recall, correct?
Well, couple issues. The most important part about it is those in many cases are customer generated. I don't want to call them complaints, but feedback to us that they're having an issue. What's most important is that we are able to investigate those as quickly as possible so we can understand what's going on. And in the past, we have not done a very good job of doing that.
Okay, haven't been a very good job doing that. We had Mr. Kane in the last panel. He testified over 2,000 complaints, and when they went through it, he's figured maybe half of them, 1,130 some, cannot be explained other than what the driver said, which is the sudden unintended acceleration. Do you disagree with that?
Well, I'm not sure if his database is sudden or unintended. I don't want to get into a what is here, but there is a big difference between unintended and sudden unintended. My understanding is the database through NHTSA includes other things such as surges, whether it be from a cruise control, a transmission, or other issues. So I can't tell you from the data that they're using.
But some of the complaints are like recently, I put it in, come to park in there, I pop over the curb, I hit a tree. The one gentleman went off the cliff and his wife died.
Yes.
And that wasn't a high speed, but that was a sudden unintended acceleration. It doesn't always have to be at high speed.
Correct. That's why I think
so
it's
all of them have to be taken seriously.
Yes, there's no question. I think
so. 70% of all those complaints in your database, we don't have an answer for yet.
There are answers with other mechanical breakdowns from transmissions, from other engine surges. There's pedal misapplication. That's the possibility as well. And we are not here blaming customers, but it does take place.
But it sort of sounds that way, and I don't mean to be nitpicking here, but when Mr. Waxman asked you a question about unintended acceleration, you said, as I would define it. That's what you said to the chairman. And it seems like when we get this sudden unintended acceleration, it's the way Toyota wants to define it, not the customer.
Well, but I think we're defining it as a customer's defining it, and that is a much broader spectrum of any type of surge or movement in the vehicle that the customer doesn't expect to take place. And that can happen from a number of different sources. To me, I'd rather have the broad spectrum to look at than a more narrow spectrum of high speed.
Well, let's talk about the customer here, because this started, as you said, the 2001, 2002 model year. You went from the mechanical to the computer electronically driven throttle system. And by 2004, NHTSA presented Toyota with a document that showed you've had a 400% increase in complaints. That was in 2004. We learned, and you testified or mentioned in one of your interviews, that you had a recall in Europe in what, April or May of this sudden accelerator. Didn't you do some things in Europe, in England, in Ireland? You have a recall there?
That's on the sticky pedal?
Right.
Yes.
So in Europe, England and Ireland, is that just sticky pedal?
That was a sticky pedal in Europe.
Well, and that's in response to sudden unintended acceleration?
Again, it is in response to the possibility of unintended acceleration, which is a safety issue. To me,
when you did the recall in Europe and did your fix in Europe, in England, did you notify NHTSA of this?
We knew about it. I knew about it in November.
Right. But did you notify NHTSA?
In 2009. We notified NHTSA as soon as we knew about the situation in the U.S. We didn't.
Well, wait a minute.
November 2009.
Okay. It took you until November of 2009, when you've had a 400% increase in complaints since 2004, to realize there might be a problem here in the United States? After a recall in Europe?
Well, I'm speaking specifically about sticky pedals. Those don't go back to 2002. The sticky pedal event began in the United States. There was one instance, I believe, in 2006 or 7.
Right.
But it was October of 2009 that we had 3 Corollas, and that generated our investigation, and we notified NHTSA immediately that we had seen that.
And you have any analysis, any evidence that sticky pedals can cause a sudden unintended acceleration?
It depends on the definition of sudden. If it means that you can be depressing a pedal, take your foot off the pedal, and the car continues at speed, it does cause that.
Quoting your counsel, typically does not translate into a sudden high-speed acceleration event, sticky pedals. So sticky pedals really isn't doing anything about sudden high-speed.
Not for high speed.
Okay. And you agree with me there's 70% of the customers in your database, we still don't have an answer for their unattended acceleration, if I can use that word.
There are many factors that lead to it.
Okay. But 70% of them we don't have an answer for. Is that fair to say?
That's probably fair to say.
Okay. If I can just show you ask you one more question. This is Saturday's Washington Post. Okay, February 20th. It's on the right-hand side. Suspicion lingers over acceleration in Camrys. Okay? And the reason why I bring it up, because they cite 3 fatals of 2005 Camrys. And it says, but in each of these 3 fatal episodes, the car involved was a 205 Toyota Camry, a model that the company has indicated is free of acceleration defects. It has not been recalled for either the sticky pedal or the floor mat interference. Is that true?
I believe so.
Any suggestions on why the Camry has this acceleration problem?
When the model year changed in 2004, there was an acceleration issue that had to do with the transmission, that there was a surge between 38 and 42 miles per hour. And that surge was caused by a torque converter locking up that wasn't very smooth. It was a shift shock, basically. And that was reported by customers as an unintended acceleration. That software was changed, and that tended to subside that particular issue.
Well, have you gone back and fixed the software into 205 Camrys then? Because these fatals I'm talking about is the one that went across the parking lot and went over the 70-foot cliff where his wife died.
Yeah, again, I don't know that.
Have you put out a recall on a 205 Camry to fix this? A recall?
On a pedal?
Yeah, on this torque issue you talked about.
The torque converter was 2004. But
these are 2005 Camrys.
I understand.
But we still have Toyota vehicles that have acceleration. We don't know what the problem is.
There is the possibility through either mechanical or human or some other type of error that could cause that.
Thank you. Mr. Barton, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for those questions. I thought they were excellent. Mr. Lentz, what's your background? You said you're not an engineer. What are you?
Sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing.
I have a degree in marketing and economics and an MBA in finance.
Okay. So you do agree from a marketing standpoint that what's going on now is fairly detrimental to your company. I was in two of your principal dealerships in Texas yesterday, met with me, and one in Houston and one in Arlington, and their sales are down about 30%. I would assume from a marketing standpoint that's not a good thing.
No, sir, it's not. Okay.
You're the CEO of Toyota in the United States. How much authority do you have to solve this problem? Can you pretty well call the shots, or do you have to ask for authority from headquarters in Tokyo?
Well, I'm the chief operating officer for the U.S. From a marketing standpoint, I call the shots.
From a marketing standpoint.
If you're talking about from a defect standpoint or a determination of a recall standpoint, those decisions have been made in Japan in the past.
Okay, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I just want to know.
But it's changing.
How far you can go to, if you make a promise today, you can deliver on it.
Yeah, but that is changing. There are a number of different organizations being put into the company that are going to make things much more transparent around the globe, much more transparent with regulators, and allow us to have input into defect decisions that in the past were always made in Japan. So
Okay.
there will be a North American on a committee that makes defect recommendations now. And there will be a process, if we don't agree with the decision of that committee, that we can have a process to override. To
Okay.
date, that has not existed.
Okay. Now, in a prior panel, I don't know if you were in the room or not, but we had a couple from, I believe from Tennessee, the Smith couple, and the wife, her car experienced out-of-control acceleration for a number of minutes, and I mean, she was literally in this car long enough she could, she put it in neutral, she put her foot on the brake, she tried to turn the ignition off, she put it in reverse, she called her husband on her cell phone. And that was not a sticky pedal because of a floor mat. I mean, something happened to that car that's unexplainable so far. Now, we normally, when something bad happens in a product, if there's a plane crash, we go to the scene and investigate the plane. If there's a bridge collapse, we go to the collapse of the bridge and we look for a structural defect or design defect. If there's a building collapse, in this case, we have a car that had out of control acceleration, and apparently all that was done was it went to a dealership and they did a routine computer program review. Why has Toyota not obtained that vehicle and taken it to your laboratory and done everything possible to discover what caused the malfunction?
I don't know specifically in her case, other than I did hear her comment that she had mentioned that a field technical specialist looked at her car.
A field technical specialist.
Right. That's somebody that works for Toyota.
Okay.
So that was
So
someone
you
that
sent
would
one person
that
you're
would have
paying $50,000 a year, and they spent an hour, and they hooked up their little program, and they said, we don't see a problem, and they filled out a form, we don't see a problem. You've got a multi-billion-dollar company that's experiencing a multi-billion-dollar hit in the marketplace. Why in the world won't you get that vehicle and do everything possible to determine, it really doesn't matter that you've got 5 million vehicles that are performing flawlessly. If you've got 10 that have failed, her problem is not a floor mat problem. I mean, it is not a floor mat.
I don't know. I can't.
Well, I know. I take her at her word. If she's going down the highway at 100 miles an hour, she's got enough sense to pull the damn floor mat from underneath the pedal if that's what's causing it. You know that, and I know. Now, you can't say it because of all the lawsuits. But why don't y'all get the cars that have had the problem, and if you need NHTSA there to verify what you're doing, get them. But if I'm president of Toyota, I'm going to get the cars that we know have had a problem, and I'm going to do everything I can to find out what caused that problem, and then I'm going to fix it if it's fixable. Yeah. With Gulf States Toyota and Vandergrift Toyota, those are good people. They want to sell your cars, and they're doing this fix, and in my opinion, it's a sham. Not because they're not fixing that, they're making it feel better. They're shortening the pedal about 1.5 inches, and they're putting this shim that Mr. Burgess has talked about so that it feels differently. But unless it is a floor mat issue, which some cases it may be, you're not solving the problem that Mrs. Smith had. She didn't have a floor mat problem. So again, why don't you get that car? It's still in existence. And check it out. Tear it apart. Do whatever, and do it with witnesses that are credible, because my guess is you got some really, really smart engineers.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully, they'll shoot straight with you. And if whatever the issue is, it is, I'm an engineer. Engineers are trained. We identify the problem, develop an optimal solution, implement the solution. You probably can solve this problem if you really try to.
Well, in terms of going out and seeing what the situation is, today we have 2 engineering centers here within the U.S. With about 80 engineers. We're adding 3 more of those because our goal is on any unintended acceleration is to be able to contact
You're not answering, why won't you get that car and check it out?
That's what I'm saying. The goal is, with these added centers and added engineers, is within 24 hours, we want to be at that vehicle, and we will inform NHTSA of the situations if they'd like to join us. NHTSA has joined us in some of these cases in the past. So we can get that car and see exactly what's going on.
But
if
you
we get it
haven't
to
gotten
reproduce.
Smith's car.
The Smith car, I have written down to find out what happened with that. I have to tell you.
I mean, again, my time's expired. If I'm CEO and I have the authority, as soon as I walk out of this hearing, I pick up the phone and I say, get that car. If I have to pay $100,000, get that car, put the best engineers on it, let's tear the damn thing apart, and let's find out what's happening to it. Because you can do all this other stuff, but if you don't go where the problem is, you know, you're probably never going to figure out what's going on.
And I can tell you, listening to Mrs. Smith, I'm embarrassed for what happened. And we are going to go down and talk to them and get that car so that they feel satisfied. I want her and her husband to feel safe about driving our products. I was embarrassed to hear the story.
Okay. Well, my time's expired, and we want, I mean, we're happy. You know, I have a GM assembly plant in my district, so I've got a good relationship with General Motors. I have a Toyota subassembly, a vendor plant in my district that makes component parts for Toyota. So I'm not on any, I want the truth, and I want whether my constituency wants to buy a GM product or a Toyota product or any other product in the automotive sector to feel that those products are safe, period. And I have confidence in your engineering department. You can solve it if your legal department will let you solve it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dingell for questions. Mr. Dingell waived his opening statement, also waived questioning the last witness, so I will give him some leeway with this panel. Mr. Dingell for questions.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your courtesy. Mr. Lentz, please tell me the date that Toyota first heard of incidents of sudden acceleration in its vehicles sold in the U.S.
I don't know the answer to that.
Please submit that to the record. Now, Mr. Lentz, please tell me the date on which Toyota commenced the first recall to address this problem in the United States.
If I don't know the answer to the first one, I don't know the answer to the second one.
Please submit that for the record. I had heard that the first notice of it in the U.S. was in November, and that your first notice of it in Europe was in May of the same year. Is that correct? Yes or no?
I'm sorry. I thought when you talked about sudden acceleration.
I'm talking about sudden acceleration.
But in November, sudden acceleration has been around in the industry for 15, 20 years.
I just want an answer, not a speech. Now, since 2001, how many complaints of sudden unintended acceleration in vehicles sold in the United States has Toyota Motor Sales U.S.A. received?
I don't know that number.
Please submit that for the record. How many of these complaints has Toyota Motor Sales U.S.A. forwarded to NHTSA?
I don't know that number.
Please submit that for the record. Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Prior to the U.S. recalls, were you empowered to authorize recalls for Toyota products manufactured or sold in the United States?
No.
Who was responsible for that?
Japan is responsible.
That was Japan's response. Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Is it true that the Toyota recall process for vehicles manufactured and or sold in the United States requires the decisions concerning these recalls to be made in Japan or with Japanese oversight?
Yes.
Yes or no? Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Is it true that Toyota had not reached a decision about whether to recall vehicle models linked to sudden unintended acceleration prior to being visited by acting NHTSA Administrator Ron Medford in December 2009? Yes or no?
I think you have to be more specific about, is that the floor mat recall issue or is that the sticking pedal issue?
Well, apply it to both.
Okay. In the case of the sticking pedal issue, I know Mr. Medford went to Japan. I can't tell you specifically if that is the reason. Obviously, NHTSA was clear with us that we were going to have to do something with those vehicles. And
And you had not previously to that time done anything?
in the case of the sticky pedal situation, I first knew about that in November of 2009. We had reports of 3 vehicles.
And he went there in December of 2009.
Correct.
Had you done anything about a recall prior to that time?
No, sir. It was still under investigation.
All right. Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Did Acting Administrator Medford's December 2009 visit to Japan and discussions with Toyota executives have any influence on the decision to recall vehicle models linked to the sudden unintended acceleration problem?
Again, if we were speaking of the sticking pedal, I don't know specifically. I was not in the meeting, but I would think it probably did.
Now, Mr. Lentz, in correspondence addressed to this committee, certain elected officials have communicated their concern that the United States government's financial stake in Chrysler and General Motors represents a conflict of interest that may be influencing its regulation of Toyota. If that is true, I am outraged. Do you believe that that statement is true or not?
I don't believe that's true. I think the government's acting fairly.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Are the reporting requirements for early warning of possible vehicle safety defects different in Japan than in the United States?
I'm not familiar with the process in Japan.
Would you submit that for the record, please? Mr. Lentz, are the Japanese requirements in regard to this matter more or less stringent than American standards?
Again, my responsibility is the United States. I don't know the standards for Japan.
Now, Mr. Lentz, if the Japanese requirements are less stringent, does that affect how Toyota evaluates potential defects in its vehicles and influence what information the company provides to U.S. regulators? Yes or no?
I would think not. The decision to make a recall in the United States is based on our experience in the United States.
Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Has Toyota definitively ruled out non-mechanical failures as the source of sudden unintended acceleration in vehicles recalled in late 2009 and early 2010?
We never rule out anything that could cause sudden unintended acceleration.
So you have not ruled that out?
We are vigilant, and we continue to look for potential causes.
Now, Mr. Lentz, put another way, has Toyota definitively determined that electromagnetic interference with or other failures in electronic throttle controls are the cause of sudden unintended acceleration in the vehicles recalled in 2009 and early 2010? Yes or no?
We are studying through the exponent study that you have now, which was preliminary. There's a lot more investigation to go on. So it's being looked at, as well as there is going to be an advisory board on quality and safety.
Thank you.
For the United States.
Now, Mr. Lentz, I understand from your testimony that Toyota has called upon Exponent to conduct tests on certain Toyota vehicles to determine possible causes of unintended acceleration. That is true, is it not?
Exponent is checking our ETCS, yes.
Now, Mr. Lentz, did the report conclude that electromagnetic interference was a potential cause of sudden unintended acceleration? Yes or no?
It has not tested electromagnetic as of yet. What you
so they did not test that, so they don't know?
It has not been tested yet. It is going to be tested, and we will provide you the final testing when it's available.
Thank you. How many models of Toyota vehicles did Exponent test?
I do not know that. When I was there,
how many did they not test?
When I was there, I saw 5 different models being tested.
Would you please submit the response to those questions for the record, please? Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no? Do you feel that this is an adequate sample of vehicles for the purposes of Exponent's tests?
If you look
said you saw 5 vehicles, sir.
If you look at the ETCS system, the system from vehicle to vehicle is very, very similar. The throttle body may be a different size, but the general architecture of the system is similar.
Mr. Lentz, I'm just a poor Polish lawyer from Detroit. Would you please tell me yes or no so that I can understand it?
I don't know how to answer that in a yes or no. I think
right.
they are testing multiple vehicles. They're testing the system, not particularly how does it work on a Camry versus an FJ Cruiser.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Now, yes or no, are the event data recorders, EDRs, installed in all Toyota vehicles sold in the United States?
As of today, no.
As of today?
As of today, they are not.
Then as of today, not.
EDRs are not in 100% of the
Now,
vehicles.
yes or no, would these EDRs contain information such as recordings of vehicle component failures that would be useful to investigators in determining the cause of an accident?
I don't know exactly what they provide. I can tell you they provide information 5 seconds prior and 1 second after an accident. I can tell you that by the end of...
Please, Mr. Lentz, submit to me and for the record the answer to that question. Now, can data from, again, yes or no, from EDRs installed in Toyota vehicles be easily read by non-Toyota personnel such as NHTSA investigators?
Yes, with the proper scan tool, of which we are going to produce and get 100 of them in the United States by April. And we will
So
make...
they have not been previously made available to NHTSA?
There's only one prototype in the United States today.
All right.
But we will make available...
What percentage of your vehicles imported into the United States or manufactured here have EDRs?
I don't know the exact percentage. I think it's all vehicles except for... If I can look at notes, I can give you...
Please submit that for the record. Mr. Lentz, in general, prior to Toyota recalls this year and last, by whom and where could such data from Toyota EDRs be read in the United States?
I don't know the answer to that because there was
All right,
only...
if you please, Mr. Lentz, submit that for the record.
There's one prototype tool available in the United States today.
So whoever wanted to look at that had to go look at that prototype, right?
Yes, and I don't know how accurate the prototype tool is.
So you don't know how accurate it was?
It's a single prototype tool. The standard for EDRs comes in September of 2012.
Now, Mr. Lentz, yes or no, did NHTSA require Toyota in 2006 to conduct a test on electronic throttle components for a 2006 Camry?
Could you repeat the question?
Did NHTSA require Toyota in 2006 to conduct a test on an electronic throttle component for a 2006 Camry?
I don't know the answer to that.
Please submit the answer for the record. Now, Mr. Lentz, if so, did Toyota or a designated third party conduct the test?
I don't know the answer to that.
If it was conducted by a third party, will you please tell the committee its name and submit an answer to those two questions for the purposes of the record, please?
Congressman, I don't know the answer, but we can get that information for you.
Now, Mr. Lentz, are reports on this kind of inquiry generated by Toyota by third parties or by its own internal investigations submitted to NHTSA?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you have these studies being made in-house or by others, and the question is, are the reports on those studies submitted to NHTSA or not?
The study that's being done by Exponent will be given to the public, to Congress, as well as NHTSA.
Have they been done so prior to this time?
I don't know which specific study you may be speaking of.
Well, I'll let you choose. Have any of them been given to NHTSA, or have they not?
I don't know, given my responsibility, which is on the sales end of the company, I can't.
You have been very gracious and kind with your time, but what I'm trying to figure out is, are you responsible for these matters? You don't seem to have the information that I have been questioning for, and I'm curious. You told us that you were responsible for sales. Are you responsible for manufacturing? Are you responsible for safety? Are you responsible for decisions of this sort? Are these decisions made elsewhere in Japan?
I am not responsible for manufacturing. I am not responsible for defect or quality decisions. Defect decisions, recalls specifically, are in fact made in Japan.
Mr. Chairman, you have been most generous with your time. Mr. Lentz, I thank you for your courtesy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rush for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lynch, I see some attendees who are sitting in the front row with some buttons on that says, I am Toyota America in America. Are these some of your employees?
These are some of the employees from our assembly plants that do a great job for us.
Right. Well, I want to commend you on the diversity. I think that you have a very diverse workforce, and I want to welcome all of your workers here.
Thank you, sir. They're hardworking Americans.
Thank you. We've heard some compelling and disturbing testimony from the Smiths this morning, and the committee learned over the course of its investigations that Mr. and Mrs. Smith are not alone in their experience with sudden unintended acceleration, and also with the frustrations of dealing with Toyota. In fact, Toyota has received thousands of complaints from its customers about frightening sudden unintended acceleration incidents. And many of these incidents, unlike the Smiths, resulted in serious injuries or even fatalities. And I would expect that your company would respond to these complaints with a sense of urgency and complete a serious investigation of these problems. But that's not exactly what Toyota did in the Smiths case. And one of the most striking things the committee heard during this investigation, and also from testimony, is how dismissive Toyota has been of its customers' report of sudden unintended acceleration. And Mr. Smith, Mr. Lentz, rather, just to tell you, I have just received a few moments ago this text written to one of my staff members from my district in Chicago. And I'm going to try to pull it up. It says here, it's from one of the executives at a local newspaper, the Chicago Defender. And it says, Stephanie, this is one of my staff members, if Representative Rush wants to put a face to this Toyota mess, my sister-in-law died December 28th in a car accident near Dallas, Texas. She and 3 others were riding in a Toyota Avalon when it left the road, hit a tree, flipped in the air, and landed upside down in a pond. Everyone died. Police said there was no evidence of any braking, giving rise to the idea that it was an accelerator problem. My sister-in-law, Sharon Love Ransom, was a senior executive with IBM. This is another indication. You've indicated to this committee this morning or this afternoon that you will retrieve the Smith's car. Would it be asking you too much to look into this matter and, if possible, retrieve the car involved in this accident? I want to...
If it's the accident that I'm thinking of, and we can have our staff check, both Toyota engineers and NHTSA did, in fact, inspect that vehicle.
And do you know what they determined?
I don't know what was determined.
Would you check further into this?
Yes, we'll check into it. If it's
has there been any issues with the Avalon brand?
There have been cases of both sticking pedals as well as floor mat entrapments. Yes.
Mr. Lentz, do you have any reason to believe that out of the thousands upon thousands of complaints, that Toyota or Lexus owners are inventing these terrifying stories about their driving experiences?
No, but from an engineering standpoint, it's critical that we get information so that we can go and investigate. Today, in many cases, information that's submitted onto NHTSA's website, unless there's an investigation opened, we don't have the name of the customer or the full VIN number. And I think going forward, one thing that we should think about doing is make that available to the manufacturers so we can cross-reference that against our databases, and we can investigate these much sooner and not have to wait for an investigation to be open to be able to do that.
From a marketing perspective, don't you feel as though Toyota and yourself, don't you feel as though you owe your customers, who some have gone through some serious injuries, a lot of hurt and pain, don't you feel as though that you owe them a sincere apology for your company, your vehicles, your product causing them sincere pain? Can't you just apologize
Yes, sir.
to them?
Yes, sir, we have. Because I will tell you, and whether it is an accident, an injury, I mean, we heard the Smiths today. You didn't have to have a death to understand the terror that she had from that accident. I mean, that's a terrible thing to have to put one of our customers through. And it doesn't even have to be an accident. I mean, we have apologized to our consumers just for the concern that we have given them with their current recall vehicles. We are sincerely sorry for that concern and anxiety we put people through. I mean, myself, my wife drives a Toyota Prius. It's a recalled vehicle. My son drives a Prius. It's a recalled vehicle. My mother-in-law is in an ES 2006. My father has a Sequoia. They're recalled vehicles. You know, I want to make sure that my loved ones are safe as well. And
But from switching back over to the engineering, but you still have been pretty evasive here about the cause, the actual cause of all this pain and suffering. There seems to be there's a lot of inconsistencies here and a lot of dualities that you're operating from. And I'm not sure if the apology is, what is it based on? Is it sincere? Is this really a problem from an engineer's perspective that you assume responsibility for?
it's any time there is one death in one of our vehicles, that pains us to have that take place, regardless of how it happens. But it's critical today, and we weren't doing a good job in the past of investigating those quickly enough, especially when it had to do with unintended acceleration. And with adding these new engineers, these SWAT teams, that we're going to be able to get on site as rapidly as we can. Our goal is to make it in 24 hours. We need to be able to do that so we can understand what's happening and make the necessary changes so that it doesn't happen again. I can tell you, I lost a brother in an accident a week after his 30th birthday. And that was 20-some years ago. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of that. So I know what these families go through.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Mr. Markey, questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, it seems to me that Toyota got the first alarm back in 2000 when the British ordered a Lexus recall due to acceleration problems. Toyota got a second alarm back in 2003 with the Canadian recall. Toyota is a global corporation. Those two alarm bells should have sent your engineers scrambling to figure out what was wrong and what was needed to be done to fix the problems. Instead, the same types of problems cropped up, in additional Toyota models, resulting in the recalls that bring you here today. So instead of deploying your engineers after Toyota got those early warnings in 2000 and 2003, they waited until problems cropped up in the United States, and then Toyota deployed lawyers and lobbyists to convince the Department of Transportation that this was a small floor mat issue and not something more serious. And that, Mr. Lentz, has done a disservice to Toyota's customers and ultimately also to Toyota's dealers and to Toyota's employees. So according to documents obtained by my office, Toyota recalled a Lexus in the United Kingdom in 2000 and a Celica in Canada in 2003 because of floor mats were entrapping the accelerator pedal, and the exact same problem that has caused fatalities in this country. Why didn't Toyota take immediate action to prevent the much later accidents that Toyota clearly knew the problem existed as far back as 2000?
Specifically on those two incidences, I can't tell you the specifics of those because I do not know, but I can tell you that a weakness in our system has been within this company, we didn't do a very good job of sharing information across the globe. Most of the information was one way. It would flow from the regional markets like the United States, Canada, or Europe back to Japan.
Okay. So what you're saying is that ultimately the decisions are made in Japan.
In the case
and
of
that
recalls.
Notwithstanding problems that are identified in the United Kingdom, in Canada, the information goes back to Toyota headquarters in Tokyo, and whether or not you in America are given orders to correct a problem identified in other countries is not in your hands. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. But that is changing. There is going to be a number of different groups set up. There's a overall quality group that Akio Toyota is going to chair.
Well, you know, that's an important change. It obviously is a policy that I'm sure all Americans are shocked to learn existed. That is, that this system of quality control that Toyota represents to be at the heart of their corporation was not something that shared information about defects in products that were being sold in the United States, even though it was identified in other countries. And that's just unacceptable, just plain unacceptable to the consumers here in America. Let me move forward quickly if I can. You've told the Today Show that the sticky accelerator pedal and the mat problems were the only problems and that you fixed them. You've said today that you're only just beginning to test whether or not the electronics are the problem, and that you've acknowledged that you can't rule out that possibility. So the reality is you don't know what is causing all the vehicles to suddenly accelerate, and you don't know if you've solved the problem, do you?
There are many, many causes. In terms of the recalled vehicle.
But you don't know if you've solved the problem.
I don't think any manufacturer knows 100% exactly what is causing.
No,
because if we did.
What I'm saying is, since you're only beginning the investigation, you don't know if you've solved the problem. Is that correct?
ETCS has been looked at in the past in Japan as they develop the products.
You said that you had solved the problem. The truth is you don't know if you have solved the problem. Isn't that correct?
Let me clarify my statement. In terms of solving the issues of those recalls, we solved the problem. And if in documents that we have also sent you, when I did a number of interviews with journalists, I made it quite clear that my feeling is, and this is a quote, my feeling is that these two fixes solve the issues that we know of. Are we going to remain vigilant? Of course we will. But we are confident that entrapment is a cause. We are confident that this pedal issue is a cause. And we are confident in those two fixes. But we are also confident that from what we know today, it is not an electronics issue.
what you know today, but again, you're only at the beginning of your investigation, so you don't know what caused the problem, do you?
We have not seen failures in the ETCS, and we have, this isn't the first time ETCS has been looked at. It is the first time that we've gone to Exponent to look at it. And when we put in our Quality North American Advisory Board, they will have total independent control of another study of their choosing. And that's going to take place, that committee is going to be in place by the end of March. So there's going to be another study soon, right after this.
And is the same thing true for the problem with the electronic throttle control system in your vehicles? Do you know what's wrong there?
That's what I'm talking about. Is electronic? The ETC is electronic control. Sorry.
Okay. So you don't know what's wrong there either.
Well, again, we have not seen failures. It has been looked at in Japan in the past.
If there is no possible problem with your electronic throttle control systems, why do you need to find a way to override the electronic throttle? If there is no problem, why do you have to find a way to override?
You always have to keep your eyes and ears open in the event that there is something.
See, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say there's no problem, but you're trying to find a way to override something that's not a problem. It leaves people with the impression that there must be a problem.
But that's why you have to continually test and test and test in the event that something develops. It could be a change in EMI. It could be a number of different things that we have to continually test and verify.
I appreciate that, but I just wish that there was a little bit more humility here with regard to what you don't know, that you just say you don't know, and then the public, as they're driving around, carries that kind of cautionary warning with them as they're driving pending the completion of all of your studies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Next for questions, we'll go to Ms. DeGette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, I don't know if you saw our opening statements or the previous panel's testimony, but I probably hold the record among the committee members because I have 3 Camrys, so I'm very, very concerned that we get this right, just like you are for your family. I want to ask you a couple questions. The first one is, you just told Mr. Markey that this is not the first time that you folks have looked at the ETCS. And you folks provided a number of documents in response to our February 2nd, 2010 request. Have you, as far as you know, has Toyota provided all of the documents relating to previous tests of the ETCS?
Again, I can't tell you it's a test or if it's just the development cycle of the ETCS.
Well, I understand. I mean, we know that you've provided thousands of pages of documents relating to the development. What we want to know is, are there additional documents relating to the testing of the ETCS that you just testified that you folks, that it's not the first time you've looked at it? And I want to know, have we received all of the documents relating to previous testing of the ETCS? Because that's what we care about here.
Okay, understand. I'll have to check. I don't know specifically.
Okay, if there are additional documents, will you provide those, please, to this committee? Thank you. Now, the only document that Toyota has produced to us that we've seen that claims to address the phenomenon of sudden unintended acceleration is this February 2010 report that we've been talking about that was conducted by Exponent. My first question is, that report was commissioned in December 2009, just 2 months ago, by Toyota's defense attorney, Baumann and Brook, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And how much money was paid? I know Mr. Boyer would want to know the answer to this question. How much money was paid to Exponent to produce that report for your defense attorneys?
I don't know. Do you guys know?
Okay, would you mind supplementing your response with that information?
Yeah,
was it over $1,800 as far as you know?
Yeah, I am sure it probably
I'm
was.
sure it is too.
My understanding is we have given them an unlimited budget to test as much as they can to find out about that.
And I'm glad you have. But I don't, I mean, you, just as you wouldn't question the efficacy of what the previous witness testified to because he was paid a few $1,000s.
Right.
You wouldn't think that that would taint the scientific results of your experts either, would you?
Well, and that's why we have an advisory
Yes or
board.
no is a good answer for me.
Yeah, I can understand why you would feel that way, but
No, I mean, you wouldn't think that your people would be tainted any more than the last witness
No.
by being paid some kind of a money, correct?
no.
Thank you.
But-
Now, let me ask you this. The exponent report was considered to be an interim report, correct? So they're still conducting tests.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. Will you provide the committee with the final test results when they are obtained?
Yes, we are going to make that public.
And when do you expect that to happen, sir?
I don't know.
Now, it's my understanding that Toyota's counsel, Mr. Hester, who's sitting right behind you, told committee staff today that Toyota had, in fact, replicated Dr. Gilbert's tests, and that Toyota was able to produce the same conditions without triggering an error code. Is that correct?
Yes. Exponent.
And did Exponent do that test?
Exponent did that test
And when did Exponent do that test?
in the wee hours of the night last night.
Last night. Okay, so this is new information for us.
Yes.
And I am assuming Toyota will be willing to share the results of that testing also with this committee, correct?
Yes, we will.
Now, in your opening statement, you said that Toyota had done extensive testing of electronics and found no issues. Do you wish to change or clarify this remark in light of the findings disclosed to the committee today?
Again, I am relying on the representation from our engineering side in Japan that they have told me that they have done extensive testing. I have not physically seen it myself. I have not seen test results. I'm relying on their information to me that they have tested it extensively.
Okay. In light of these new revelations revealed by your attorney, Mr. Hester, that Exponent was able to replicate the same conditions as Dr. Gilbert last night, does that change your testimony today?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay. Late last night,
yes.
according to your testimony.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Okay.
We will provide that. I will tell you, again, I don't know exactly how Mr. Gilbert has done this.
Well, are you disagreeing with Exponent, who apparently was able to replicate the same test?
No. What I'm saying is I'm not sure if what Mr. Gilbert has done is necessarily something that's real world that can happen. And I can also tell you that Exponent was also able to do this on a competitive vehicle with the same result. So this is not necessarily something unique to Toyota. It may be unique to his test paradigm.
Okay. Now, I just have one last question for you. I would assume, in light of the questions raised by Dr. Gilbert's testimony today, as well as the witnesses, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and we have a lot more anecdotal information. I've got this couple in Colorado I've been talking about, and on and on. I am going to assume that Toyota is going to take this seriously, that they're not going to deny that these acceleration issues could be happening because of the ETCS, and that they're going to expeditiously investigate this and going to provide the results to this committee.
Yes.
Would that be a fair statement of your intention?
Yes.
I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeGette. Mr. Doyle for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, welcome, and
Thank you, sir.
for all the questions you've answered. You heard the testimony of the first panel, and Dr. Gilbert sounds like a pretty reasonable guy. And you just found out that your testing company, Exponent, was able to duplicate what he did. Doesn't it make a whole bunch of sense? And I think that Joe Barton said the same thing, that you guys talk to Dr. Gilbert when hearing's over, probably offer him a little more than $1,800, and ask him to come down to Toyota or with Exponent, and the three of you sit together and see if there's something. What's the downside to testing this gentleman's theory?
Oh, there's no downside, and that's why I don't want to downplay what he has done. Again, I'm not sure about his testing paradigm, but we welcome anyone that can find any issues with our electronics. I mean, if there is a problem, we want to find it and we want to fix it. So, yeah, there's no problem with him getting together.
It's
with
in your
exponents.
best interest to find. I mean, no one has more to lose than you and your employees and your dealers to not fix this problem. I mean, you should have every incentive, and I believe you do want to fix the problem. I mean, your company has a very good reputation. It's been put into question. And you know, perception is reality. We know that in our business. And if the public thinks that your car isn't safe, you need to go out of your way to prove that it is.
Yes, sir.
And so I just think, you know, before you leave Washington, you ought to get this guy's phone number, and he should be sitting down with your people, and you ought to test his paradigm and see whether it has any merit.
And what's important is, when I was at Exponent, I drove a vehicle as they did the test to short circuit the accelerator pedal. And so I had the sense and the feel of what happens when it gets into limp mode, how they can measure based on the scan device what happened. And that's why I just have to really understand, as his exponent, what Mr. Gilbert did, because my understanding is we were splicing wires together.
Well, if I were you, I'd want to know what he did too. There's no good outcome from you not trying to get this problem fixed. It's not good for America. It's not good for all the people that work for your company here in this country, and all the people that drive your cars, for you not to go the extra mile and test any theory that seems to have any merit to it.
I agree 100%, and that's also why, going forward, anytime we have a reported incident of U.A., we're going to send a SWAT team out there. The goal is within 24 hours, so we can learn as much as we can. That's why it also would be helpful if we could get full VIN numbers from NHTSA, because sometimes they get a complaint that we don't ever receive. And the current thing, unless an investigation's opened up, we can't get that information. It would really be helpful for the entire industry, not just us.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Ms. Christensen for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome the dealers and the workers in the audience. I didn't recognize that they were here when I made my opening statement, but I did say at the time that we want this Toyota to really fix this quickly, not only for the customers, but for the workers and the families that depend on them having a job. Mr. Lentz, how long have you been in your position?
Since July of 2006. As an EVP, then president, and then president COO, but basically the same responsibility.
I read an article, I don't remember what paper, about a week and a half ago maybe, that was really talking about the history that Toyota has in not responding to complaints. But it started out by saying that in the late 80s, Toyota would actually go to a customer's home and say, your car has a problem, we'd pick it up, they'd pick it up and they'd take it and fix it. By the late 90s and beyond that, Toyota started maybe fixing problems that they found in future cars and not even telling the other customers about the problems. And then we have the failures that have brought us here today. So that's a total culture shift over that period of time. Can you tell us what happened? I mean, what happened to the Toyota of the 80s to bring us to the Toyota of 2010?
One comment before that is there are dealers that still make house calls. My father, who lives in Colorado, his salesman lives about 3 or 4 miles away. And every time he needs service, the salesperson drops his demo off, picks up my dad's car, and takes it in for service. So that does still happen. We're not totally out of the 80s yet. But I think what happened, I think we lost sight of the customer. I think I don't think it was a goal for us to grow faster, but we did. We had a lot of customers that loved our product. Our loyalty rates were growing higher and higher, and our volume grew. The complexity of the product line grew, from the number of models to the number of engines to the number of transmissions to everything else that goes with it. And I think we outgrew our engineering resource. And I think when that happens, and we had strategies to deal with that, but the strategies didn't work. And I think as a result of that, we're suffering from that today. And I think the most important thing is we lost sight of our customers. And I'll give you an example, even in the floor mat issue. In the very beginning, back in 2007, we recalled vehicles because of the all-weather mat. The mat was too thick, and there was risk it would bind up underneath the accelerator pedal. And it would happen if the mat wasn't properly put down. So from an engineering standpoint, is if the mat's properly in place, it's no big problem. But we didn't understand a simple thing like how customers use a floor mat. Because in climates like this, people double stack mats. They put their rubber mat on top of their carpet mat, not just in our cars, but others. We didn't understand something as simple as that.
And just to get one other question, you know, I'm really disturbed by what sounded like a real snap diagnosis. I'm a physician in the case of the mats. When we're presented with a problem, we can almost diagnose it by listening to the history, but we always look at every other possible cause before we really make a diagnosis and we start to treat. And it, you know, that doesn't sound like it happened here. And in your business and my profession, lives depend on the decisions that we make. And it's really important to really examine all of the possible things, do rule out for every other possibility. Can you assure me, that, I hear you saying that it's not this electronic thing. Can you assure us today that not only with this, but with every complaint that you're going to do a complete diagnostic check?
Yes, I can tell you that the company's processes from top to bottom are being evaluated. And it's starting with the president of the company, who's going to speak tomorrow to one of the committees. He is responsible for a global quality committee. It's a brand new committee that's going to look just at quality and safety. And there are representatives from each of the large regions around the world that are on that. There's an independent advisory board that will report to that, to look over his shoulder.
Who appoints the independent advisory board? I mean, you know, we talked about people paying and stuff. How do you get this independent?
You go out and hire safety and quality experts from outside of the company to oversee what's happening, to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that's the North American region of that. And these committees are going to be announced by the end of March. They are going to be responsible for an independent, totally independent safety testing of the throttle control system.
My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, I'd like a little bit of clarification on some of the points that have been raised here today during your testimony. A few moments ago, in response to one of the questions, you were talking about that we welcome anyone who can find the problem and so that we can fix it, something to that effect. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Is that? When you say we, who do you mean? We welcome?
Toyota.
Toyota International.
Yes. Again, TMS
Toyota.
U.S.A. is a distributor for Toyota in the United States.
Correct.
My group does not design or engineer products.
And I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because you're the president of Toyota Motor Sales in the U.S., as was pointed out by Ranking Member Barton. Does Toyota Motor Sales make safety determinations? Does your department make safety determinations?
No. What we do is we get feedback from a number of different sources. We get feedbacks from customers that call in or contact us online. We look through the internet. We look at NHTSA data. We look at a number of different sources. We get reports from our dealers. We have product reports. All of that information from my side gets put together in reports, and they go to Japan, to the quality side. So to say that I'm not involved in quality, I am from an antenna standpoint.
Okay, but you also said during your testimony that the communication was pretty one-way with respect to safety and reporting back to Japan, because you've testified here today in relation to Mr. Markey's questions about the alarms that were going off in other parts of the world, and we just sort of had we have a plea of ignorance that we didn't know here, and it might have made a difference in some of the accidents that could have been avoided. So I'm a little bit perplexed by the idea, does Washington staff, safety staff that deals with NHTSA report to you as the head of sales?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Who does that safety staff that reports to NHTSA report to within your company?
Yeah, it reports to TMA Washington, D.C. office.
Okay.
So there's Mr. Inaba, who is testifying tomorrow, is the chairman of Toyota Motor Sales U.S.A., but he's the president of TMA. So that reports in through him, New York and Washington, D.C.
So he's the person who's responsible for safety decisions in the U.S.A.?
No.
No, it's still in Japan.
Still in Japan.
Correct. Okay.
Japan.
Why would Toyota send the head of sales to discuss safety issues here today?
I was invited to attend.
Okay. All right. So it was a decision made by the committee? Is that what you were invited by who to attend?
This committee.
By the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you this, because you said in your testimony, in recent months, we've not lived up to the high standards our customers and the public have come to expect from Toyota. And we're all concerned about that. And there are two groups of people who I think that we've all expressed concern for. Most obviously, the consumers out there who
Yes.
put their trust and faith and their families
Yes.
in those Toyota vehicles. And, of course, the workers in this country who rely upon Toyota to make a living and take care of their families. I guess that's why I asked you the question about the we, because we've also heard a lot of confusing testimony about the electronic throttle control system. 6 years ago, NHTSA compiled data showing that Toyota Camrys with electronic throttle controls had over 400% more vehicle speed complaints than those with manual controls. So it's rather difficult to, do you think that that's an acceptable sort of number to suggest that there isn't something to it? I mean, 400% more.
No, there's no question it's a big number. But I think, again, we have to understand what those complaints are surrounding. I don't know if all of those are sudden acceleration instances.
Right. Well, why don't we know all of that? 400%. We might not know everything, but when you say, I don't know if all are, that's a big statement, too. We must know more than that statement reflects.
Well, I can't tell you, again, if you're speaking off of the NHTSA database, unless those are investigated, I can't tell you just from the database exactly what's going on. And that's why it's important that we are able to get that information. And quite frankly, I would love to be able to get confidentiality agreements with insurance companies as well, where they can supply us with that kind of information so we can see what's happening.
Well, Mr. Lentz, the American people and the American market has been very, very good to Toyota. A lot of money has been made by the company in decades past. And so when we read, I'd like to assure the committee and the American people that nothing matters more to Toyota than the safety and reliability of the vehicles our customers drive. We're committed not only to fixing vehicles on the road and ensuring they are safe, but to making our new vehicles better. And your testimony continues. When we read that and then we hear the testimony about the safety decisions being made in Japan in a vacuum, isolating those who are selling these cars to our constituents and their families, and who are having the workers and the dealers sell these cars, you know, it begs the question about why people would be concerned of where the facts match up with the testimony. And I yield back.
No, I understand, and that's why the process is changing, where there's going to be a person from the United States that sits on the defect committee in Japan to be able to make those decisions. And if they don't agree with that decision, there's going to be a possibility for us to then appeal that decision. And it's not just the United States, but from around the globe. We'll be on that.
Okay, Mr. Lentz, but I have to tell you, it comes very late.
Yes, sir.
We
Yes,
appreciate that things get fixed, and that is the goal, that things get fixed, and no more you know, loss of life is suffered. But again, one has to ask, would it have happened but for some of the mistakes coming to light. And I'm glad for the change. I hope it's enough. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Ms. Schakowsky for questions, please.
Thank you. Mr. Lentz, are you asking us to believe that no one at Toyota USA knew about recalls in Canada? I mean, it just strains credulity to think.
Again, specifically on a 2003 Celica, I don't know the specifics on that. I don't know if that was a vehicle that was recalled here as well. I don't know the specifics. If that, again, was a certain floor mat issue that was unique to Canada. I just don't know details about that particular recall.
Except that you gave before as a reason that these things are not shared. And it's just really hard to imagine that whether it was deliberately shared or not, that given the fact that many Americans can see Canada from their house, that we did not know about the...
Again, I can't speak specifically to that exact instance. I don't know the details behind what it was recalled for.
Okay. In 2008, a woman named Guadalupe Alberto was killed when her 2005 Camry suddenly accelerated, jumped a curb, and struck a tree. Her car didn't even have floor mats at the time. So why wasn't this incident further investigated then? It says, I mean, we know as recently as November, or you say in November of 2009, Toyota, or at least up until then, was still claiming that floor mats were the only problem.
I don't know the specifics of that particular accident. I can look into it for you.
That'd be fine.
But the floor mat issue came around earlier than that. The issue in November was really as we got into this issue of the sticky pedal that we learned about.
Right, until then. But here was a 2008 accident. She didn't have a floor mat. But anyway, you know, we're all in the customer service business ourselves.
Right.
We have constituent service personnel in our offices. We take it very, very seriously. I heard you say that you apologized to customers for the problems with Toyotas. Did you apologize to customers who were treated like they were crazy when they made these complaints? Did you apologize to the Smiths?
I have not spoken to the Smiths, but I'm going to. Again, it was embarrassing to hear what happened to them. I don't know the specifics of the situation, but it's just to hear that, especially on the Lexus side of the business, that's a very unusual way for business to be done.
It's a very unusual way. Let me quote to you from a letter that was sent to a customer. A 2005 Toyota Tacoma driver told your company that his truck accelerated by itself despite stepping on the brakes, slammed into 4 parked cars. Here was the answer. The throttle was inspected and moved freely without any binding and was found to operate as designed. The brakes will always override the accelerator, which may not have been true at the time. You said you're making that change. But anyway, in order for this accident to have happened as reported, 2 totally separate systems, the brakes and the throttle, would have to fail at exactly the same time. This is virtually impossible. And there's that phrase, that sentence, this is virtually impossible, seems to have been repeated over and over to your customers. You're in charge of sales. Is this any way to deal with customers, just to tell them absolutely impossible?
No, it's not. And I have talked to our group that I'm going to be involved in every event of unintended acceleration so that I know what happens. So you know, just overall customer complaints that come in. I get probably 20 or 25 complaints a week. Each and every one of those complaints, I have to receive a buck slip back to know exactly what the issue was, what the solution was, and whether the customer is satisfied or not. And
you also review, I review letters that go out to my constituents. Do you review, does someone in authority review letters that are sent out so that the credibility of the customer is not only questioned, but just negated?
Yeah, I personally do not. I will find out. What is that, a recent letter?
Well, I'm looking at 3 answers that use the same phrase about virtually impossible. So I don't know the date.
Okay.
I'm sure our staff has those letters.
No, sorry,
and the
I can
dates
check it.
on the letters. And my time is up, but I hope you'll also make sure that recalls that happen in other places are become part of the calculation of how you respond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Braley for questions.
Mr. Lentz, I want to begin by commending you for sharing your personal story of loss with the committee here today. And that takes great courage. I would encourage you to share that story with the decision makers in Japan who are making the key decisions on product defects, product recalls, product retrofits, and failure analysis, because I think they need to hear that story from you.
Thank you.
I also want to commend you for commending the dealers in this country who have done an extraordinary job responding to your recalls and performing retrofits and tying up their staff all over this country. Some of them are my friends and my constituents. So I appreciate your recognition of the sacrifice they're making. I want to focus specifically on the comment that you made on page 2 of your statement, which you repeated here today, where you said, "We are confident that no problems exist with the electronic throttle control system in our vehicles. We have done extensive testing of the system and have never found a malfunction that caused unintended acceleration." I'm having a hard time squaring that with Toyota's 2002 Technical Service Bulletin, which noted that if customers complained of surging accelerators, reprogramming their engine, which you mentioned earlier, was a way to fix that problem, and that, sir, sounds like an electronic problem to me.
I don't know that for certain. Because I can't tell you if it's a software issue, if it's a transmission issue. There are a number of different reasons for surges. It could be a high idle up that takes place sometimes when air conditioning kicks on, as an example.
But reprogramming the computer would not be a mechanical fix,
No.
would it?
No.
And the other reality of that notice is that these 2002 to 2006 Camrys, which were the subject of that Technical Service Bulletin, you're not addressing the problem of the brake override retrofit with those models, are you?
Camry, I would have to look and see what year it goes back to. But we are going back in the case of Camry.
All right. Now, one of the things you also mentioned in your statement was that in December you asked Exponent, a world-class engineering and scientific consulting firm, to conduct a comprehensive, independent analysis of your electronic throttle control system with an unlimited budget. So let's talk just a little bit about that. Your counsel who's with you today is with a very well-known firm that defends not just Toyota but other auto manufacturers in product liability and crashworthiness cases all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that,
yes.
Correct? And I am in no way impugning them for their role, but I find it very odd that when you were presented with this challenge of getting to the root of this problem, you went to your defense firm to go make the contact to arrange for this independent testing.
Again, our legal staff put together the request. I can tell you that that report in its entirety is going to be made public.
And we look forward to it.
So if there are issues in it, it's going to come out.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the company that you retained, Exponent, because they're a successor corporation to a company called Failure Analysis Associates, which has done extensive work for not just Toyota, but all the big auto manufacturers and the motorcycle manufacturers on not only failure analysis, but also providing expert witness testimony. You're familiar with that?
I'm not sure about the expert witness, but I know they have worked for other automotives in things like vehicle stability control and other things that have been developed that have been great for the industry.
Sure. And, you know, one of the things that I can tell you is that I have a copy of a deposition that their chief technical officer, Roger McCarthy, provided in 1998. And in that deposition, he testified that Failure Analysis Associate, then known as Accenture, received between $30 and $40 million a year for the work they did for the auto industry. Were you aware of that?
No.
Well, isn't it true that Toyota has paid them over $1 million in the past for the work that they've done?
Exponent?
Yes.
I do not know.
But would you be willing to provide us with documentation of what Toyota has paid to Accenture, not just in relation with this study that's being done, or in relationship with Mr. Gilbert's follow-up analysis, but over the period of time that these recalls that are being considered or have been issued have been performed? Can you do that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make a formal request that we get as much information as we can from Toyota International, Toyota North America, documenting the financial relationship between their company and Accenture or its predecessor failure analysis associate, not just in relationship with the study that was done that's been the subject of this testimony.
That's fine, we'll do that.
All right. Now, one of the things that you talked about was the fact that you were present during some testing that was done at Accenture.
Exponent,
Exponent, yes. And is that something that you were part of when there was filming that was done to document the testing?
No, no. I just wanted to go see how they test. I've never been in a vehicle that's gone into fail-safe mode, so
Okay.
I wanted to understand what it feels like from the consumer standpoint. What fail-safe feels like as you're driving down the road.
Were you involved in any way in the analysis in terms of defining the scope of that project or how the results would be submitted?
No, the only portion I was involved in was that when that research becomes available in its entirety, it would be made public. It would be made available to Congress and NHTSA.
And did Toyota make a direct relationship for the performance of those services with Exponent, or was that something handled by Bowman and Brook?
I don't know.
Because when you indicate in your statement that you requested them to do a comprehensive independent analysis with an unlimited budget, I'm just wondering whether there are documents that would define the scope of that request and the terms under which Exponent would be compensated for what they were performing. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure it must exist.
Okay, then I would also request that, Mr. Chairman, and I would yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Braley. That concludes questions by members of the subcommittee. We'll go to questions from members of the full committee. Mr. Booyer.
Yes. As far as I know, Accenture has not been hired by you to do any engineering or testing, have they?
Exponent.
Right.
Yes.
Accenture is like an accounting financial firm, right?
Yes.
All right. You were asked questions by my Democrat colleague about Accenture, and I just want to make sure that, for the record, it's been cleared. With regard to the firm that you hired, Exponent, as far as I'm aware, even the United States government turned to this firm to help us come to the solutions as to why we lost the shuttle Columbia. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is not a fly-by-night firm. This is someone who is one of the best in the United States that is when it comes to problem solving.
Yes,
we
want to define the best. And again, there will be another review of this ETCS done by this independent study group. They may choose to go with them. They may choose someone else.
Now, with regard to some testimony that I wrote this down because it was bothersome to me. You said that with regard to testing that was done last night, with regard to the methodology used by Dr. Gilbert on the first panel, you said, quote, it's not a real-world scenario. So can you explain that a little bit further? In other words, he did testify that he used manipulation. He told me that he did not cut 3 wires. But when you say that there was a methodology that's not a real-world scenario, help me understand.
Well, yeah, I think he said tapped in, which is how he gets into the harness. Our understanding is, and again, this happened just 12 hours ago, so I don't want to attack him without knowing exactly what his process was. But my understanding is he took the plug off the back of the accelerator pedal. There are 6 wires on the back of that. 2 that go to the sensor, 2 that go to the power, and 2 that go to the ground. And he tapped into the 2 that go to the sensor, and basically through some device tied those two together, and then tied one of the power wires into another one. So again, it just doesn't seem as if that is something that may necessarily happen in the real world. And Exponent has tested what happens if you lose ground, what happens if the sensors break down, but in a very different way. So I just would like to understand his methodology and make sure that it's not the testing paradigm that's causing this.
So when ABC showed this, in order to have these results, your testimony would be that Dr. Gilbert had to induce fault by manipulation to create and generate an artificial voltage for the result for which he was seeking.
Yes, and go around the
and so that normally isn't going to happen as I'm driving one of your products down the road. Would that be correct?
I believe so. Again, I'm not an engineer. That's what I need to study through Exponent, because they did the same study.
All right. Earlier, I made the comment about, I think the American public, we have seen what happens when NBC Dateline stage-to-stage crash between two trucks to claim that General Motors' fuel tank design caused fire crash on a crash test on television, and we were all pretty upset over it. And so now what we have is a repeat scenario with regard to ABC, also using a manipulation, not using a real-world scenario. So that type of thing can be left to the credibility of the viewer and the American public. Now I'm going to shift. The reason I'm going to shift is, let's go back to Columbia. Okay, when there is a crash in America and we have a concern, we go to the product. So Exponent looks at Columbia, tries to gather as much information as they possibly can, data and what's left.
Right.
When there is an airline that crashes, NTSB will go in and try to recreate and rebuild that aircraft. When I look at what Exponent is doing, and I look at the report, and I look at the thousands of vehicles that they're looking at, what bothers me is why wouldn't you, when an automobile that has been identified as this sudden, unintended acceleration, why isn't that product pulled aside and ripped apart so you can understand what is exactly going on? Those are the 1,000 ones that, if I were in your seat, that I would be going after and applying the greatest minds of the world to understand.
Yeah, in many cases, one of the field technical specialists or one of the quality specialists, they do go out. And if there was a component failure, they would take that component off and send it to the quality side to see what's going on. But in the case of the electronic throttle, if they don't get a code reading out that shows a failure, and they can't recreate it, it's very, very difficult to be able to do that. Now, they may take the throttle body off if it's cracked or if it's somehow defective. They'll take a pedal off if it's defective. If an ECU is defective, they'll take that off. But in many cases, that's what's so frustrating about unintended acceleration, is it's very, very difficult to duplicate. And unless they can duplicate it, they have no way of knowing exactly what's taken place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gonzalez for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, in my limited view of things, I always think in terms, how is the consumer protected? How is the best interest promoted? And I've just concluded that, one, it's the manufacturer's own moral behavior, first and foremost. Then we go into the governmental regulatory oversight. And then we have our civil justice system. I'm a great believer in the civil justice system. The problem, that's always after the fact, way after the fact. So I'm looking at the manufacturer's moral behavior, and I'm looking at the capabilities, proficiency, and competency of the regulatory scheme that Congress has in place. When any of this breaks down, Congress will move forward. And you heard Mr. Waxman say, look, we may need legislation, and that's the process that we're engaging in at this time. It's going to get hot and heavy, and you're going to see all the different interests. Last week I was on the radio, and when I simply said, let us not rush to judgment. That goes whether it's Toyota, whether it's GM, Ford, I don't care who it is, an individual or a corporation. The interviewer then said, are you apologizing for Toyota? So we've got that issue. Now, we have members of Congress that may be a little aggressive in fulfilling their duties. You have letters going out that are saying, it does sometimes appear, however, that the negative news is being encouraged by plaintiffs' trial lawyers, union activists, and those interested in cutting into Toyota's market share. That's the environment. It's not healthy. It's not good. And all these reasons, which are totally wrong and ridiculous, are being attributed to those individuals simply trying to do their jobs as members of Congress. So I'm hoping that this process will be fair. But in the meantime, if there is a rush to judgment, this is the danger. Not just a Toyota, but everybody that will be similarly situated sometime in their lives, whether it's an individual, a company, or a corporation, is that months from now, we may discover that it wasn't electronic and that all of the action that was taken was timely and diligent. But it really won't matter. We have an old saying, and I said this the other day. Everyone will remember the accusation. No one will remember the exoneration. And for a business in the United States, people are making decisions today on what car they're going to buy. By the time we figure out what the truth may be, that decision has been made. And I'm going to tell you that I believe what's going on today will affect that decision. Okay. That's why we all have to be so careful in how we do this and that we're fair to all parties, whether it's going to be the consumer, the Smiths, or even Toyota, but to be fair to everyone. I want to know what you can tell Toyota owners today regarding the safety of their vehicles.
What I can tell them, and I'm not going to go through the detail of all of my family drive products. I would not have my loved ones driving products, recalled or not, if I didn't feel they were safe. So that's number one. Number two is we have processes in place, new processes in place, that are going to ensure a lot more transparency and responsibility to make sure we make faster decisions that are the right decisions. So everybody has defects. Everybody's going to have recalls. But how quickly we react to protect that consumer, how much the consumer sees us standing behind their product, that's what's most important. And I can tell you the other thing, we have a lot of dealers sitting behind me. The way we start to build trust in our brand is through our dealers, because our dealers are the true contact with the customer, and they are doing a tremendous job in taking care of these situations. I mean, almost 800,000 customers already taken care of in about 20 days is an amazing number. And you'll hear from the dealers that the customers are understanding. Sure, there are one or two customers in each dealership that are pretty upset at what's going on. But for the most part, our loyal customers, they know for the last 50 years that we've stood behind our product. We've done the right thing for them.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think he touched on it. I have 35 seconds, but quickly. You drive Toyotas. Your family drives Toyotas. Everybody you care about drives Toyotas. You're going to quit driving Toyotas?
No, sir.
And you heard that members of Congress on this committee drive Toyotas. I'm not going to ask them whether they're going to quit driving their Toyotas. My suspicion is that they will not. So I think maybe that's the message that comes from this hearing today. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to be vigilant, diligent. We're going to get to the bottom of this. The question is, to what degree can we protect the American consumer? And I believe that we're going to measure up to that duty and responsibility that we owe them. And I just, again, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. And I
yield back, Mr. Chairman.
It starts with us.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. McInerney, who's joined us, member of the full committee. Questions, please. 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you allowing me to address the hearing. Mr. Lentz, thank you for attending today and taking some tough questions. Addressing the safety issues we're discussing today is vitally important, but I'd like to focus my questions on a related matter that I believe reflects on Toyota's disregard for its loyal customers and its loyal employees. I'm referring to the decision recently to shut down operations at NUMMI plant in Fremont, California, which will cost us about 35,000 jobs in the state of California. And I don't believe that Toyota has done nearly enough to prevent this loss of jobs. I have an opening statement that I'd like to include in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Will be without objection.
Mr. Lentz, Toyota is currently experiencing major public relations problems and the public concern about safety failures is going to hurt your bottom line. California is one of your biggest markets, and it's obvious that keeping NUMMI open will help rebuild your image. Wouldn't that be beneficial to Toyota?
Our image is beneficial, but specifically NUMMI, I think we have to be clear that Toyota is not shutting down NUMMI. NUMMI is shutting down NUMMI. It's a separate corporation that was 50% owned by Toyota and owned by General Motors. And when General Motors moved into bankruptcy and the new partner became Motors Holding, Liquidation Holding, it was General Motors abandoning NUMMI that set this in play. That's the truth of the matter. When they pulled out, and they pulled out 30% of their volume, that plant was difficult to become commercially viable. It's a long way from our supply lines. We supply a lot.
It's not a long way from your customer lines. Mr. Lentz, I understand that the Pontiac Vibe was only about 20% of production at NUMMI in 2008, with Toyota vehicles making up the rest of that production. Surely Toyota could modify its operations to account for a 20% drop in production. It seems to me that you're putting NUMMI out of business because of antipathy toward West Coast workers, not out of necessity. Unfortunately, Toyota hasn't demonstrated that it made any meaningful effort to explore possibilities that would keep NUMMI open. And I was asking you, do you expect Californians to believe that in the brief time between GM's announcement and your decision to close, were you able to definitively determine that it was impossible to maintain operations at NUMMI?
Yes, it's not financially viable to do. It's a long way from our logistics lines. The volume, 20% is a pretty big number. I mean, California sells about 13 to 14% of the nation's sales. That's a plant that has capacity for almost 400,000 vehicles, that's building around 300 at the most. I mean, you've got to remember that when this industry collapsed after Lehman, we had a 40% collapse from the peak of the marketplace in 2000, 2001 to where we ended last year. There was tremendous overcapacity all across the United States. And it's not something you take lightly, closing a plant. I mean, you look at the workers behind me. When that market collapsed and we had 100,000 unassigned vehicles sitting at our ports that we didn't have dealers to be able to accept because the inventories were so high, we didn't lay these people off. We kept these people working because we know that they are a huge asset for us. So we don't take closing a plant, or NUMMI doesn't take closing a plant lightly. We believe in our workers. They've done a tremendous job in getting us through all this. So NUMMI is, unfortunately, we're going to stop ordering product at the end of March. And we will do what we can to try to help the workers through transition. And hopefully, I don't know if another assembly can go in there, or they can redevelop the property and create jobs through the redevelopment and whatever goes in there. But it's just, it's not.
Mr. Lentz, I'm really thinking of your benefit as well as ours. I mean, I'll leave you with this parting thought. You're having a public relations nightmare right now, and it may benefit you a slight amount to close a plant like that, but you're going to face a public backlash in the West Coast. Now, on the other hand, if you work with us to keep that open, it's going to be a real plus for your public relations issues. I just ask you to keep that in mind as you move forward.
Okay, just understand as well, we're going to do whatever we can to help through that transition. We're not legally obligated, but we are going to throw money into it to help through this. I just wish that our partner of 25 years would step up and do the same.
That's all.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Let me just ask you a few questions, clarify record a little bit.
Please.
If I can, there's been a lot of testimony here and a lot of questions. So just make sure I'm correct here. The only independent analysis that you've had, when you spoke on today's show, you said you have an independent analysis on your problems with the sudden acceleration, has been Exponent.
Yes, correct? To my knowledge.
And you were referring to that report of Exponent, right?
Yeah. Now, NHTSA has also done studies in the past, but I don't know how robust they are. So I don't want to.
But you don't have knowledge of any independent studies they did? Okay.
No, not to my knowledge.
All right. And there's been no independent electronic throttle control system studies?
Not of Toyota. There may be industry-wide. I don't know.
Okay, but for your...
Yes, to my knowledge.
After this situation, okay. And with Dr. Gilbert here, he's come up with this, and apparently your exponents, engineers, been able to duplicate it. Is it fair to say then, when they duplicated it, they get the same result as Dr. Gilbert, that the fail-safe system did not receive the signal to enact? So in other words, the fail-safe system, whether it's an override by electric, however it was happened, the diagnostic codes did not kick in to put in the fail-safe system to get that braking going.
Yeah, I believe what he's done is gone around, designed a way to go around the override system.
Sure.
So whether it can happen or not is...
And we don't know the source of it, but it's a bookend, as they said, to start the research.
Yes.
And that could be of value to Toyota in trying to get results. Okay. You mentioned the SWAT team you're going to have at the end of March. I think
Yes.
you said you're going to have. And in 24 hours, they'll have information be on site. Let me ask you this. Mr. Dingle asked, and a couple of questions have been about this event data recorder.
Yes.
The event data recorder, as you said, tells you what happens 5 seconds before an accident and 1 second after. Specific requests have been made on the Auburn, New York crash, which was a 210 Camry. That ERB has been seized. Do you know where it is? Why isn't the information made available to NHTSA or anyone else? No one seems to know the results.
I don't know. Well, if I can get information on that crash.
Okay. Well, how about the South Lake, Texas one? That was at 208 Toyota Avalon. Mr. Rush brought up, happened on December 26th. Same thing. It says conduct a site visit on 112 where they pulled the black box out, if you will. Where's the results on that?
And they pulled the pedal off. I don't know, because I know NHTSA was also down there with our engineers, but I don't know specifically what the result was.
Or how about Mr. Jeff Popinski? He was from Minnesota. He's had a 207 Lexus ES350 and had problems with it and requested repeatedly from Toyota to give him the information off the black box, and he's always been denied. If we're going to have this SWAT team and we're going to be more transparent and bring forth this information, why not on these fatal crashes, especially these ones I mentioned, why not disclose what happened on that black box?
Well, I think right now the issue is there's one tool in the entire United States, and I believe it's still in the prototype stages. So the final production tools we won't start seeing here until April. So
but standards for the black box were developed in 2006 by NHTSA that everybody has to have starting 2012 and 2013, correct?
Yeah, it's in 2012.
So if we have standards in 2006, you're still trying to develop a prototype?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So the information off this black box, then, if I wanted to get the information, if there's no mechanism in the United States, it has to go to Japan to get the information?
Correct. Correct. It is a unique mechanism for our black box.
And this defect committee, U.S. may have a representative on it, but decisions are still going to be made in Japan?
Well, there will be the process of making a defect decision is there's a general manager of the quality group that has a committee with a number of different engineers and everyone else. That has always been in Japan with Japanese. That committee now is going to have people that will be seated on that from other parts of the regions around the world.
Sure.
United States for certain, I don't know. I'm assuming Europe will probably be there as well. So they will be they will be tied into all the information available, into the decision process, and we will have the ability to appeal that if we don't believe in it.
You have input, but decision will still be made in Japan.
Yeah. Well, the input will be made, but we will have the ability to appeal that decision that we do not have today.
Let me just ask on the black box there. Where's that data stored?
Pardon?
Where's that data stored? If I get a black box out of the South Lake, Texas accident, where would that data be stored? Would that have to go to Japan to get downloaded?
No, I mean if we have the scan tool, once these tools are available.
Right. But right now, because you don't have the scan tools.
Yeah, I don't know if Japan has tools. And if we're in prototype stage, I'm assuming that it's a global prototype stage. I don't know that for certain. But I do know in April we're slated to receive about 100 of these.
All right. That'll be in April, okay. If you receive, personally, you said you receive 20 to 25 complaints a week. Any of them on unattended accelerations?
I've got to tell you, in the last 3 years, I've seen them on surges, but I don't recall any one that was on an unintended incident.
Could you provide us an example of some of those surges that you personally handled?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Burgess, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I think it's already been addressed, but just would like for you, Mr. Lentz, or Toyota to provide the committee your analysis or exponents' analysis of when they do the Gilbert testing, the retesting on the Gilbert thing. And I just echo about the black box. South Lake is right outside of my district. A very tragic accident right after Christmas where a car went through an intersection, ended up upside down in a pond, and all the occupants died. Some question as to whether or not there might have been a medical emergency involved in that, but I think the black box, in addition to the other physical evidence, the brake pads and that sort of thing, will be very instructive for your group and, of course, instructive for us as well. So as this information on these look-backs, if you go out and get the car from Tennessee and your engineers come up with a decision on this, I just think it'd be very useful that this committee would have that information as early as possible after you get that.
Surely.
And heaven help us if there's another uncommanded acceleration, but get that car.
Yeah.
The first thing that happens is somebody has to look at that car and figure out what's going on with this.
Appreciate it.
We're about to wrap up. I see Mr. Engel is here. Did you have a question, Mr. Engel, of this witness? You're a member of the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of the questions have already been asked. But, when I was asked by the media yesterday what question was I going to ask, I said that I would ask, what did you know and when did you know it and what do you still know that we don't know? And I've listened to the hearing, and Mr. Lentz, all I can say is that I hope you can appreciate that we are very skeptical because it certainly seems, if you just look at the chain of events, that there was an attempt to kind of sweep everything under the rug. And I'm still not sure that the question has been reasonably answered in terms of, you talk about these 6 vehicles that you tested, but why would not your first inclination be to test the vehicles that accelerated? When I heard Mrs. Smith earlier on, the first panel, and she talked about how it just went 100 miles an hour and she couldn't do anything to stop it, wouldn't it have just been logical to take that car and others like that and just rip it apart? I know Mr. Barton asked you it earlier, but I'm not sure I'm satisfied with your answer.
Again, I don't know the specifics, but it sounded as if she said that there was a technical person that was down there and did look at the car. So I can't tell you if they didn't see anything, that's probably why they didn't tear it apart. If they would have seen a component failure, I'm sure that component failure would have come off that car and we would have received it. And again, it may have happened, I don't know. I don't know the specifics on her accident.
But it wasn't only her car. There were others that gave similar stories. And for how long was Toyota saying it's mats, floor mats, or rugs, or sticky pedals? When it just would seem clear by her story. I'm sure there were others like her that it wasn't that at all.
Well, it may not be. There are so many different causes. They're very broad. They're very rare. And in some cases, they're just very, very difficult to duplicate. So that's the frustrating part about researching what happens on some of these instances, especially if there is something that's going on with the throttle. If there aren't error codes and it can't be duplicated, that was one of the challenges with the sticky pedal in the beginning, was by the time the consumer got it to the dealership, all the moisture had dried from the pedal and the pedal wouldn't stick. And you've got a consumer saying, I'm telling you, I know this thing's been sticking, but by the time they get to the store, it can't be replicated. And that took a while to understand exactly what was going on.
But in every case, would that happen in every case? I mean, surely once there were many different instances, it seemed to be a pattern that, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe something is wrong. There's not only the acceleration, but we've heard about the steering and brakes and other things. And, it just seems that if you look at everything, it certainly seems to me that there was an attempt to keep it under the rug and keep it under the table. Let's not tell anybody anything, and maybe it'll go away. I just, and of course, with all the testimony, I mean, NHTSA is to blame as well. But I just don't think that Toyota handled it properly. So let me just go ahead.
Well, no, in the case of brakes, if you're talking about Prius brake, we jumped on that very quickly and have taken care of that. And in the case of Corolla steering, it's being investigated right now. So yes, we have complaints on it. NHTSA has complaints, and we're digging into that right now to find out what is the issue, and let's make sure the customers are happy with their products and safe with their products.
So let me ask you as the last question. When I was asked yesterday, what would I ask you? And I said, what did you know and when did you know it? And what do you know that we don't know yet? What do you know that we don't know yet? What's going to come out in the days and weeks? I know Mr. Toyota is testifying at another committee tomorrow. What bombshells are going to come out that we don't yet know?
God, I hope there aren't any more. I've had enough bombshells for 1 year. I'd get back to the good old days of 2009, and I don't think I'd ever say that. Right now, we have to fix the process so these things don't happen again. I don't know what's behind the curtain. No one knows in the auto industry as manufacturers what defects you could have down the road, what challenges you have. So it's important that we have built-in quality and built-in safety so we don't have these issues. And that's why our processes are changing to make sure that we get back to where we once were. I mean, this was a company for 50 years in the U.S. that whenever you said Toyota or you said Camry, it was quality, dependability, reliability, and safety. And we've stubbed our toe. And we've got to get back to where that once was. And we're going to do that.
Well, I would hope so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Mr. Gingrich, question.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Lentz, very, very quickly, I could ask you a couple of yes-no questions like, have you enjoyed being here today? And do you want to take any more questions? And I guess the answers would be yes and no. But seriously, I did want to ask you, do you think that this is a software or hardware problem?
In the case of the ETC?
Yes.
Again, based on our analysis of what we've seen, based on going to accident sites and checking these cars out, I don't think it's either right now, but Exponent has not tested the software yet. So that's yet to come. So if there is a software issue, if there is an issue about how independently these two processors are working, because that's the key to make sure that this thing works, we'll know that.
But it could be either, and you're going to get to the bottom of that.
We have to get to the bottom of it. And
absolutely.
And it may be that the bottom of it is they find nothing. And we have another independent group that goes in and researches again.
Mr. Lentz, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I've got, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gingrich. That concludes all questions of this panel. Mr. Lentz, thank you. We'd invite you to stay for the next panel. It's going to be Secretary LaHood. We have 5 votes coming up. I'm going to try to get the Secretary's testimony in, and then we can go vote. We'll have a little recess. Thank you.
Thank you very much.